Hello everyone and welcome to our class spotlight series featuring Warlock. This class has been in a very interesting position since the release of Descent of Dragons. Its varying decks have ranged from aggressive strategies like Zoolock to very slow methodical ones such as Handlock. This difference has led Warlock to have multiple competitively viable decks. It's important to note that the first wing of the new adventure will be releasing on Tuesday the 21st, but it's not expected to shake up the meta that heavily. While this wing will be releasing a new Warlock card, we won't be taking a look at it until a later video as it's way too early to determine how it will affect the meta. Now before we really dive into Gul'dan's decks, make sure to subscribe to keep up to date on all Hearthstone-related content. Now it's time to get started. As mentioned earlier, there are two very different strategies that Warlock can play towards. First is a very aggressive strategy that everyone knows and loves with Zoolock. The other is more of a control style of gameplay known as Handlock. Let's take a look at Reynad's very own Zoo Warlock first. Zoolock is currently a very solid and viable deck on the ladder. It has relatively decent matchups against a good portion of the field. It capitalizes on creating early board states and snowballing that out of control. This is an effective strategy against decks without many clears, one big example being Rogue. Rogue has a very difficult time dealing with any sort of early pressure, and Zoo excels at doing this. Now Zoo may be strong against decks without board clears or removal, but it will struggle with any sort of deck that has these tools. Highlander Mage, Warriors, and even Handlock all have powerful tools in order to help them deal with Zoolock's early board states. Not to mention that once the first board is dealt with, current Zoo lists don't have many ways to burst their opponent outside of random knife juggles or Kronk's Dragonhoof. Since there are some solid matchups and some poor matchups, Zoo finds itself in the middle of the pack in terms of viability. Not quite the strongest, but not quite the weakest either. Handlock, although being a very different type of deck, also finds itself in the middle of the pack. Not the strongest, but most certainly not the weakest. The reasoning is the same in that its matchup spread is fairly even across the board. One really cool aspect of Handlock, however, is that there are many different ways to build it. A player can decide to place a Galakron engine inside of the deck. It can just be dragon focused and not necessarily rely upon Galakron cards, or it can even just be a cluster of random cards that just end up working well together. The first and arguably the most popular version is Galakron Warlock. Synergizing with powerful removal and tempo cards, this version aims to have the best of both worlds. The dragon package allows for great pressure, while the Galakron support cards either add onto that or help to remove boards in junction with cards like Plague of Flames. Galakron Warlock is also a great in-between of Zoo and complete Handlock. Games always play out differently depending on matchups and what players end up having in their hands. Some games turn out very aggressively, while others are a slow grind for resources. Traditional Handlock is very similar to how it used to be in the past. Life tap for the first couple of turns, play a Twilight Drake or Mountain Giant, and begin the race. This style of gameplay isn't particularly foreign to Warlock, but it has definitely adopted some very interesting tech inclusions. Cards like Valdris Felgorge allow for greedy plays, while Nether Breath acts as removal and life gain. Some players like Monsanto even just started playing Elven Archers, Swamp Dragon Egg, and Evil Genius just as more versatile tools to work with Plague of Flames, and well, because lackeys are kinda just good. The main struggle for these slower types of Warlocks is that they don't have enough very favorable matchups. They're just pretty even across the board, which isn't a bad thing at all, but it's just not as good as some other decks. Classes like Rogue, Shaman, and Warrior have a slightly favorable time into these matchups. Not to mention they can lose on the greed or value game to other mid-range styles, or simply get burst out of the game by aggressive strategies. Warlock as a whole currently sits in the middle or higher parts of tier 2 and 3. It's a very viable and consistent deck to climb ladder with, but may not bring you the same results as some of the other classes or decks that there are to play in Hearthstone right now. Warlock is definitely a lot of fun though. I mean, who doesn't love summoning demons? Thanks for tuning in on this segment of Class Spotlight. Make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel for even more videos like this in the future. Leave a comment down below about your thoughts on Warlock and what class we should highlight next. Thanks for watching.